In this session, I'll be discussing about the IAM service of AWS, that is Identity and Access Management. Basically, it is about providing secure access to AWS resources. As an administrator, you need to control the access to AWS resources. You may need to give some specific privileges to different users. Like you want to give, if an employee is at higher level, he may be given more privileges than an employee who is working at some lower level. So that means as an administrator, you need to control the access to AWS resources with respect to different employees. So that is the purpose of creating IAM users, IAM roles, etc. So that means you are going to differentiate the privileges to resources among different users. So when you first create an AWS account, you begin with a single sign in identity, right? That has complete access to all AWS services and resources in the account. So in the morning, when we created an account in AWS, so we were acting as a root user. We were having all privileges to resources, right? And this identity is called as AWS account root user. But AWS suggests that services should not be accessed further using root account. That means once you have created a root account, further if you want to use services of AWS, you should not continue using with root account as a root user, because it gives access to all the services and resources in the account without any control. So that may result in increasing the chance of being compromised. So AWS suggests that even if you are the root user of an AWS account, you should also create an IAM user account for yourself also. Maybe you can act as an admin IAM user, right? That means IAM user with administrative privileges, right? But you should always create that kind of account, so that so that account, if even if compromised, so it will be the person will not be able to access all the services and resources. That means limited compromise, it will be compromised in a limited sense. So another reason for having IAM services, like you are working with your subordinates, they want to access resources from your account, but again you want to give them limited access to the resources. So you can create them as IAM users. So they will be having limited privileges with respect to resources, but billing will be done to your account, right? So IAM allows you to grant permissions to other users to access resources from your AWS account without having to share your password or access keys. So you'll be granting permissions to other users as per their application requirements. If somebody wants to just have access to creation of the resources, and you do not want to give him access to or permissions of deleting the resources, so you can give him creation privileges, and you deny the deletion related actions to that users, right? And they can access the resources, and they can have permissions, they can do all these things without sharing your password and access key with the IAM user. And another benefit of having IAM is that using this service, you can centrally manage user identities. You can centrally manage their security credentials, such as password, access keys, and permission policies that control which AWS services and resources users can access. So let's say you want to give some of the users, they are all working as a software developer, and you want to give similar kind of privileges to all these users. So rather than giving privileges to each and every user, assigning privileges to each and every user, you can just create a developer group and put all these users into that group. So automatically they'll be getting all those privileges which you have assigned to the group. And once a person, suppose he leaves that organization, so what you have to do is you have to just remove that employee, that person from the group, and automatically all the privileges will be revoked. So all charges for activities performed by your IAM users are billed to your AWS account. This is the link through which you can access IAM services. Otherwise, if you have opened your account, you have signed into your account, you need to just go to the IAM service. Let me show to you. Okay, before going to the demonstration of IAM, let me explain how IAM works, right? So, these are the main entities of IAM infrastructure. There's a principal who makes a request to access the resources. So the accessing of resources is basically taking some action on the resources. So one by one, let us understand what we mean by principal, what kind of requests are made, what do you mean by authorization, and what kind of actions can be taken on the resources. So, principal is one who uses its sign in credentials to authenticate with AWS. So, how you authenticate with AWS? You provide your username and password. So, this is the way you authenticate yourself with AWS, right? There can be multi factor authentication as well, because sometimes root user may have enabled MFA for some of the other users. So, in this case, they'll be requiring an MFA device, multi-factor authentication device, through which some kind of password will be generated, or some code will be generated, using which, in addition to username and password, they have to provide this code which is generated by MFA device. So this is a kind of two-factor authentication. So multi-factor means more than two factors can be there, more than two steps can be there for authentication purpose. So authentication means you are proving your identity to AWS, right? So further, when you have proved your authentication, when the principal has proved its authentication, then he can request for the resources, right? So principal may be user, it may be a role, it may be a federated user, or it may be an application, right? So basically, federated user may be a user who is not part of AWS account, who is not related to AWS account, who may not be having any AWS account. He is external entity who can gain access to this IAM resources, or who can gain access to resources of an AWS account by proving its identity through some identity provider. It may be Google, it may be Facebook. So there is an option of specifying identity providers in AWS account. So once you specify that these identity providers I will be accepting, so these federated users can prove their identities through these identity providers. And if you give them privileges to access the resources from your AWS account, they'll be able to access those many resources as per their privileges from your AWS account. So they can also act as a principal, right? And some of the applications can also act as principal. So basically, principal means that you have to prove your identity to AWS, and then you will be able to use the resources, right? So next is, these principals can make a request for an action or operation on an AWS resource. So request is nothing but some kind of action. Let me enable this. Some kind of action on AWS resources, right? So request is performing some action or operation on AWS resources. So access is granted in response to an authorization request. So this request will say it is a kind of authorization request. That means once your request is approved, authorized, only then you will be able to perform some action on the resources, right? So, for example, when you first sign into the console and are on the console homepage, you are not accessing any service. When you select a service, the request for authorization is sent to that service, and it looks to see if your identity is on the list of authorized users, what policies are being enforced to control the level of access granted, and any other policies that might be in effect. Right, so that means whenever you are making some request, it will be checked against the permissions or policies granted to you. And if it matches, yes, you are allowed to access this resource, you are having these many privileges, you have been granted access to, or you are allowed to perform this action on the resource, then you are authorized, right? Once you are authorized, then you can perform the specific action, right? So basically these permissions, privileges, all these are written in the form of policies, right? So policies are nothing but the JSON documents which mention that this principal is having permission to perform this kind of action. You can see there, this is mentioned over here, that this action can be performed on these resources, and these are the conditions under which this action can be performed. So condition can be like that if you are making this request from so and so IP address, then only you can perform this action. So maybe that IP address belongs to your organization, only then you'll be able to perform this action. If you are accessing or you are going to perform some action on a resource from a system, digital device which is outside of your organization, when you are not in office, you are not allowed to perform that action, you are not having then that kind of privileges. So these policies can be created by using JSON or by using visual editor. I'll show you, right? So these policies majorly are of two types, but other can be there. Majorly these are of two types, like identity based policies and resource based policies, right? Identity based policies means these will be related to different identities, these will be related to users, these will be related to groups or roles. So in terms of policies, these are actually referred to as identities, users, groups, and roles, right? And resource based policies are with respect to resources, they are attached to resources, right? So we'll be discussing in detail these two types of policies, right? So resources of an AWS account can be used by, or action can be performed by the principal, or the resources, action on these resources can be performed by users who belong to other AWS account if you have given them those privileges, right? So this is showing you a user who belongs to different AWS account than this one. This actually, this boundary, so this boundary is belonging, all the contents which are in this boundary, they are belonging to a particular account, and these are showing the users who belong to different AWS account. So they can also use the resources from this AWS account if you have given privileges to them. So principal is a human user or application that can make a, just a minute, that can make a request for an action or operation on an AWS resource. So, first thing is that principal has to authenticate to the AWS by providing its sign-in credentials. So, after authentication, the principal can be granted either permanent or temporary credential to make requests to AWS depending on the principal type. So IAM users and root users are granted permanent credentials while roles are granted temporary credentials. So we'll be soon seeing how these are different, like what we mean by IAM user, what we mean by roles, how they are different, how roles are getting temporary credentials and why are they not getting permanent credentials. Then, what we mean by actions, actions or operations that the principal wants to perform, such as add, delete, or edit. So, for example, IAM supports approximately 40 actions for a user resource. Why we are saying here that user is acting as a resource? Because we can perform operation on user also. We can create a user, we can delete a user. So that's why user is also considered as a resource. User is also considered as principal because he may sign in and he may perform action. User is also considered as a resource because we can perform action on user also, like creating a user or deleting a user, right? So to allow a principal to perform an operation must include the necessary actions in a policy. So whatever permissions, whatever privileges you want to give to a principal, those privileges should be added in there in its policy that applies to the principal or the affected resource. So AWS resource is an object upon which actions or operations are performed. So resources may be user, because I have just shown you that how can we perform actions on user. It may be group, it may be role, it may be policy or identity provider object. So request, when you make a request, when principal makes a request, what uh, things are included in the, or what information is included in the request. So one is you'll be including the action, whether you want to create, whether you want to delete, or whether you want to edit the resources on which the action is going to be performed. Data related to the resource, such as if you are working with DynamoDB, you will be mentioning DynamoDB table name or tag on an Amazon EC2 instance. So some information related to resource will be provided, and some information about the principal is also included, which includes the policy that are associated with the principal, that the principal used to sign in, and some more information like about IP address, time of the day, that may be required in the condition, right? So during authorization, AWS uses these values to check against the policies that apply to the request, right? It then uses these policies to determine whether to allow or deny the request. So if principal has made a request, suppose to delete an instance, right? So that will be checked against some policy associated with that principal. If the policy says that the principal can delete the instance, then he is allowed to delete the instance. But if the policy says he is not having privileges to delete the instance, then the instance which he is selecting for deleting, it will not be deleted, because these privileges are denied for him. So I'll be showing all these things through demonstration also. This is just for clearing your concepts. Then policies, we come to policies. So identity based policies control what actions an identity can perform. I told you identity is a term that is used for users, groups and roles that can be authorized in policies to perform actions and to access resources, right? So, identity based policies control what actions an identity can perform on which resources and under what conditions. So, noteworthy point is that it will be consisting of, it will be including the actions which can be performed and the resources on which these actions can be performed, and also the conditions, right? So, three main things you need to remember about identity based policies. One is actions on which these can be performed, under what conditions, and on which resources, right? Then comes the different types of identity based policies. So it is of two types: managed policies and inline policies. So, managed policies are standalone identity based policies that you can attach to multiple users, groups, and roles in your AWS account. Again, there are two types of managed policies: AWS managed policies, the policies that are created and managed by AWS; customer managed policies. These policies can be created by customers, and they are managed in AWS account. So they are more customized in comparison to AWS managed policy, because these are created by customers, and they take, in these policies they can uh, precisely mention what kind of control they want in their policies. So they are more customized in comparison to AWS managed policies, right? So inline policies, that you add directly to a single user or a single group or a single role, right? So these policies maintain a strict one-to-one relationship between a policy and an identity, right? So what's the difference between managed and inline policies? Managed policies, they are actually created in a general way. They can be attached to multiple users, multiple groups, and multiple roles. But inline policies are attached to single user or a single group and single role. So they are more specific to a single user group or role. So that's why they maintain a strict one to one relationship between a policy and an identity. They are deleted when you delete the identity. Suppose you have attached an inline policy to a group, so when you delete the group, this policy will automatically be deleted. Then comes the resource based policies. These are attached to resources. Suppose you have created an Amazon S3 bucket and you want to restrict its privileges to some specific identities. Means now you have attached the policies to the resource with respect to its usage. So these types of policies are known as resource based policy. So these policies grant the specific principal permission to perform specific actions on that resource and defines what conditions this applies, right? So these are by default inline policies. There are no managed resource based policies because they are resource specific. Resource based policies are popular for granting cross account access. So, we were just discussing that we can allow users from other AWS account to access resources from our AWS account. So, in that case, you can restrict access to some of the if accessed by some account user which belongs to some other AWS account. So these many privileges are allowed, these many permissions are allowed. So in that case, you can use resource based policies. So you can attach resource based policies to Amazon S3 buckets, SQS queries, etc. So these resource based policies cannot be applied to all the resources in AWS. They are specific to some resources. You can apply these policies to some given resources. Requests made using the AWS account root user credentials for users in the account are always allowed. That means if you are using the resources, you are accessing the resources as a root user, so you can access any resource, means all the permissions are given to you, right? But if you are accessing the resources, you have signed in as an IAM user, so by default all the requests will be denied unless and until you have been given access to some of the resources, right? If no means permission is allowed to you, then by default all the requests will be denied. That means root user, when it creates an account for an IAM user, it has to explicitly allow the resources on which actions can be performed by the that IAM user. Suppose a user is subordinate is working under you, and he's working on S3 bucket and EC2 instance. He just require these two resources. So you will be allowing the access to these two resources only, and by default he'll not be able to access any other resource, right? So, an explicit allow in any permission policy, identity based or resource based, overrides this default. That means allow, when you allow this any resource to a user, so the denied request will be overwritten. An explicit deny in any policy overrides any allows, right? If by default you have allowed, like you have said that this user can allow is allowed to use any resource, but later on you explicitly deny some resource, so that uh, access to that particular resource will be denied, and rest everything is allowed. So now we'll see how we can add users, IAM users, and how we can create different roles and can assign different policies to these users. This is just a sample JSON document. This is showing how we can create a policy in JSON document. This is showing you that we have allowed a user to perform all Amazon DynamoDB action. You can see effect is allow and action is on DynamoDB. Dot star means all the actions are allowed on DynamoDB. And on which resource of DynamoDB? This particular resource. So this is actually ARN. ARN is Amazon resource name. So every resource in Amazon is given a unique name that is called as Amazon resource name, right? So this is a kind of policy which has been created by a administrator, right? This is showing you about the IAM role, usage of IAM role. So in this case, you can see when admin creates a role that grants access to the image bucket, then admin launches an instance with the role. App retrieves role credentials from the instance and app gets images using the role credentials. Basically, what is the purpose of creating a role is that you want to give an identity specific permissions with credentials that are valid for short durations. Like you do not want to give uh, a user privileges for an indefinite time period. You want to give him privileges to access some particular resource for an hour, for 2 hours. So what you can do is you can create a role, and that person will assume a role, right? Assume a role means he'll be able to use that resource temporarily for some specific time period, right? So the an IAM user AWS service can assume a role to temporarily take on different permissions, right? I'll also be showing you this concept practically, right? So let's go to, so now we'll be accessing IAM service. Click on services. So it is available under security, identity, and compliance. Again, if you are not aware that it is available in this particular group, you can just type here IAM, right? So it is available under security, identity, and compliance. Click on IAM, right? So this is IAM dashboard. You see it is written over here, add MFA for root user. That means if you want to enable multi-factor authentication for the root user, it is going to improve the security for this account, because multiple steps will be there to authenticate uh, yourself to the AWS, right? Now I'll tell you how we can create IAM users on this IAM. So click on users, and then you need to click on create user. So I'll be demonstrating IAM using that instruction sheet which I have shared with you, right? Because I have taken a case study, right? So that will be more useful for you and will enable you to clear the things. So first of all, we are going to enable the, see, I'm clicking on account, and here is an option that whether you want to give access to IAM user or role to billing information, because by default no IAM user or role can access the billing information of your account. So earlier it was deactivated, by default it is deactivated. What I did is I click on edit, and then I activated the service and clicked on update. This is just to show you, because we are going to use this billing information. We are going to give the privileges to our users related to this billing information. So for that purpose you need to activate IAM access. That's why I thought of sharing it with you, right? So first thing is you need to do this, and then we'll be creating users, IAM users, right? So as per this instruction sheet which I have shared, uh, the step one says that activate access to billing data on your AWS test account. So I have just activated the access to billing data. I've just shown it to you. And next is that I'll be creating two users, right? So one will be given privileges to view billing information, right? So for giving privileges to view billing information, there is a policy which is AWS managed. So let me first create a user. So here the name given is Pat, right? So I need to first of all check this option, provide user access to AWS Management Console, because there are many options to access AWS services. Another is command line interface, CLI. So if you want to give access of AWS Management Console, that means visual interface, you want to give access to this particular user, you need to check this option. Then you say, I want to create an IAM user. I'll later on be telling you what we mean by identity center also, right? So for now, I'll be clicking on I want to create an IAM user. Now you need to set a password for this particular user. I need to set it, I need to give a custom password. That may be, so users must create a new password at next sign in. If it is usually recommended that whenever IAM user signs in with this password, he should create a new password for the next sign in. But for now, I'm not checking it. Then yeah, everything is fine. I have created a user. Then next, okay, password is not as per the account's password policy. Okay, let me keep it. Okay, now it's fine. So there are three options now. One is that you want to add this user to an existing group, because he may be a developer and you just want this user to, you want to add this user to an existing developer group so that he may get same privileges which are there with the developer group, which are there with the other user developers, right? Or another option is attach policies directly. Let's say I do not want to put it to some group, he is an administrator, I am a root user and I want to create this user as an administrator. So what I can do is I'll not put it this user to a group, I'll attach the policies directly. And if you want to assign him administrator privileges, just click admin administrator access. You can assign this policy to this user and you can just click on next and then create the user. This is the way you can create an administrator in your AWS account, right? So you can see that it is written over here that it is a AWS managed policy, right? These policies are all created by AWS. That's why we call them as AWS managed policies, right? Now, if you create a policy by clicking here, create policy, then that will be called as customer managed policy, right? Let me show it to you. So see, you can create it using Visual Editor or you can create it using JSON editor, right? Visual Editor, you need to select a service and then you need to add permissions. Like I select EC2 service. So the actions allowed may be something like, or what we can do is, you can see that there is allow selected, means whatever you will select, only those actions will be allowed on this EC2 instance as per this policy which has been created by me. Or another option is, let's say you want everything to be allowed but some of the things you want to deny. So what you want to deny, what things you want to deny? I want to deny uh, creating tags, right? So now whosoever I'll be assigning this policy, let's say I create a user and I assign this policy to that particular user, so he may be able to create EC2 instances but he'll not be able to assign the tags to the EC2 instances, because I've checked this option and I have denied this action, right? I have selected this particular action of creating tags and I have denied this action, so he will not be able to create tags on the EC2 instances, right? So this is how we can create a customer managed policy, right? Maybe we can create this policy later on. And yeah, one more thing is that you can also provide the request conditions, that this request will be in action when it is requested from some specific IP address or the user is MFA authenticated. So action on resources are allowed or denied only when these conditions are met. right? Or you want to specify ARNs for, means if you want to allow these actions on specific resources with specific ARNs, resource names, then also this can be done. So you need to add the ARNs on which you want to restrict the access, right? So all these options are there to make the changes, right? Then we come back here. So right now I'm not making him an administrator. I will be adding it to a group, right? So I have created a group, bill group, or I'll show you how I can create a group. So as per this document which I have shared with you, instruction sheet, this pat has to be a member of yeah, it has to be a member of finance group, right? Is a member of finance department and works with billing and payment, so it requires full access to the billing information in your AWS account. So I'll yes, I'll create it, make it a part of billing group, right? So I'll create a group called as billing group, right? And I'll attach this group with a billing related policy. Yeah, this billing policy, right? Which gives him access to the billing information, so he'll be able to see the billing information because I have assigned this policy to this particular group, right? Create user group. See, billing group I have created, and he is, this group is attached with the policies billing. So that means all billing related privileges have been assigned to this particular group. So this user I'm going to add to this particular group, right? Next, no tags. I don't want to add any tags. Create user, right? So download.csv file, actually this CSV file will be consisting of all this information, console sign in URL for this username, then the password, and then you can share this .csv file with the this particular user pack, right? So I'll download it because this will not be available later on. So this is the time you have to download this file so that it can be shared with particular IAM user, right? So now anybody can access my billing information if he signs in as a pat user, right? Then I'll go back to the user list. Similarly, I have created a user Terry as per this instructions sheet. I have or let me delete it and show you again this thing so that it is clear to you. Yes. So I'll create next user named Terry, right? And will provide access to AWS management console. I want to create an IAM user, giving him custom password. Right, in the same way I have created another user Terry, but as per mentioned here that you have to don't have to give him billing privileges. He is a member, he is acting as a support user, so he'll be part of this support group, right? And this support group is not having billing privileges. This has been assigned the policy of support user. This is another policy, And as we did previously, in this case also, like previously we attached billing policy with the billing group. Now we have attached, this is also AWS managed policy, so this has been attached to support group, right? So next, create user. Again we need to download the .csv file. Okay, right, or you can directly email sign in instructions. Now we return to user list. Can anybody sign in as Terry? So what I was saying is, I was discussing that previously I signed in as root user. Now I am going to sign in as IAM user. One option is that I provide the 12-digit account ID and then click on next, and then I'll need to provide the username and password for this IAM user, that is Pat. Another is that the .csv file which I downloaded for this particular user, when I'll be sharing this file with the user, he can use this URL for signing in and then provide the username and password, right? This is another option. So I'll be using this URL, right? I've used this URL, right? So yeah, so automatically it has taken the account ID from that URL. Then I just need to provide the username mentioned in this CSV file, then the password, right? Sign in. So I'm able to see month to date cost, last month's cost, last month total cost. Some of the things I'm able to see from the billing and cost management option. That means this particular user is having privileges to view billing information because I have assigned that particular policy to this PAT user, right? Now you can see that it is being displayed as IAM user, the username at the rate. This is the account ID of root user. That means all billing will be done to this account, right? I'll be signing out of this user account. Then I'll be signing in as Terry user. Again, I need to open the credentials of Terry, right? So again, I'll be using this console sign in URL, copy, paste, right? Now I'll be signing in as Terry. I'll be taking the password from here. So you can see now it's being displayed as access denied because these privileges were not assigned to this particular user. He was a member of support group, and the privileges assigned to him was only of support user, right? So he has not been assigned billing uh, policy, right? So what we can do is, now, let's say he needs to work, he needs to access the billing portal once in a month as per his application requirements. So, what we can do is, what the administrator can do is, he can assign a role, he can create a role, and that role is having billing privileges, right? And this person, this user, can assume that role for some specific time period. So that means when we want to give a user specific privileges for a short time period, then we can create a role for that purpose, and that person, that user, will be assuming that role for a specific time period. And let's say that can be mentioned while creating a role, the time period for which he can assume that particular role. So that can maximum is 12 hours and minimum is 1 hour, right? So we'll see how we can create a role. We'll be assigning that role to the Terry, and Terry will be assuming that particular role. So let me sign out of this, right? So now I'll be signing in again as a root user so that I can create a role, right? Please let me know if anything is not clear till this point. Again, any of you may log in as Terry and can see on his system that whether you are having access to billing information when you are signing in as Terry user, who is IAM user of my AWS account. Any of you may log in as, even if you have not created an account on AWS, you can log in as Terry user, who is IAM user of my AWS account, and let me know what you can see in the billing and cost management web page, right? So now I have logged in again as a root user and I'll be creating a role, right? So I'll be again going to IAM, and here I'll be clicking on roles, right? Now I'll be creating a role, right? Now role will be created for custom trust policy, because I'm not going to allow this kind of role which allows AWS services like EC2 etc to perform actions in this account. So I'm not creating a role for some of the services, right? And others are not applicable in the same way. So I'll be clicking on custom trust policy, right? First I clicked on IAM, then create role, and then on custom trust policy, right? Then this kind of web page is visible to me. Then I need to click on this assume role. It is already there, right? So access level read or write assume role, because the person will be assuming this role, so this should be checked, right? Then comes the add a principal. So what I want is, I want that particular user Terry uh, to take this role, right? So that means here I need to add a principal. Select principal type, I am user. So I need to paste the ARN of Terry, because I want to assign this role to Terry. So he'll be acting as a principal of this role. So I need to go to Terry, click on Terry. This is the ARN of Terry, copy it and paste it over here, right? So I have added principal. Principal type is IAM user. ARN is the ARN of Terry. So this will be added, right? Automatically this information is added in JSON, right? So I have created principal as Terry and action is to assume this role. Next, so what kind of policy you want to attach with this role? Again, billing will be attached because I want to allow him to see the billing information. So I've clicked on billing. Billing is selected. Next, role name. Role name is temporary billing access, right? Then no tags I want to assign. Create role. Yeah, the role is created. Let's see. Yeah, this role is created. Temper billing access. Let's click on it. Yeah. So this is the ARN assigned to it. So this is the link using which role can be switched, or you can see maximum session duration. That means this role will be assumed for 1 hour. If we want to change it, you need to click and edit, and you can change the duration for this particular role. You can increase it also, right? So let's continue with 1 hour for now. So this role has been created, and this can be assumed by Terry. Any of you may log in as a Terry and can check whether by assuming this role, I'll be logging out. Now I'll be signing in again as Terry.
Ma'am, I have created and made the changes accordingly, Terry, for my
Uh,
account, and now it is earlier it is not billing is not available for him, but now I
mm,
can see the billing for him.
can you share your screen, please, so that others are also aware of this, that it is working.
Actually, I am doing on parallel PC, so that's
Okay, okay, no issue, no issue. But it is good to hear that you are doing side by side, and you have successfully seen that yes, by assuming a role, he'll be able to see the billing information,
thank you.
right? Okay, okay, I'll be showing you. Yeah. Now I'm signing in as Terry. So I'll be switching to this role, right? What was the role? Temp billing access. Yeah, it was temp billing access. B was small. Yeah, 18659602801. Yeah. So now let me click on billing and cost management. Yeah. Now I'm able to see this information, right? So that means while assuming role, I became I got the privileges to see this billing information, but just for an hour, I'm having this privileges. If I want to get, means I want to see the information again, then I have to again assume the role, right? So I hope it's clear to you. Let me sign out of it. Now, what you can try is I have shared another instruction sheet also on that link that you can try. In addition to that, I've just shown you one point where I was denying the creation of tags on EC2. This can also be tried. You can create a user who has been denied the creation tag action on EC2, and then you sign in as that user, and you try to create an EC2 instance and try to assign some tag to that particular uh, instance, you'll not be able to do, because those privileges has been denied, right? So you can try these this one which I have just discussed. In addition to that, this one EC2 instance privileges, and third one is which has been shared on instruction material link. So these three exercises you can try in tomorrow's practice session, and if you face any difficulties, we can discuss in the afterwards session, right? Till this point, if you are having any issues, you can ask me.